Hi, I'm Sharaad Kuttan and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that brings you the most important conversation in ideas, culture, and the most happening books in town. And today we have Kee Thuan Chye, the author of this new book, Lim Kit Siang, Malaysian First, Volume 1. Thuan Chye, of course, is well-known playwright, actor, journalist, author of many books, some of whose titles are unpronounceable on television. So I'm not going to even say that. I mean, I can pronounce the words. It's just like I'm not allowed to. Okay, Thuan Chye, your book on Kit Siang, not commissioned by the man.
Nope.
Something that came out of your own desire to write about him. And I think when speaking to writers about why they choose a subject for a biography, obviously this is what we would call this book, right? And an authorized biography, I guess, because he's allowed you to write it and participate it quite a bit in the writing and the research, at least. The question is why? Why Kit Siang? Of all the characters that you could have chosen in the world or in Malaysia, why Kit Siang?
Because you know, I've had this idea of wanting to do a biography, a full biography of him for quite a long time, even before Pakatan Harapan came into power. Because I feel that what this man has done, and in terms of the sacrifices that he has made, and the fights that he has gone through, and having suffered for his beliefs, remaining consistent throughout, you know, 5.5 decades, believing in his Malaysian dream of a multiracial Malaysia, where all the races can live and work together to prosper and progress. And so I feel that such a life needs to be documented and to be put in proper perspective. You know, not with the idea of writing a hagiography and making him look like a saint. No, not at all. That's why it is a very independent project. But the idea is to also try and understand this man, because he's very much misunderstood by the people at large, and also to find out what makes him tick, what makes him keep going after all these decades, right? I mean, it's incredible when you think about it. A man who has suffered so much, you know, defeats, betrayals, detentions, all kinds of persecutions, all kinds of name-calling, demonizing, and still he keeps going. And even when Pakatan Harapan fell, well, he was depressed for a while, but after that he was up and running again and saying, look, we must not give up. You know?
Okay, so the impulse for the book comes from a place of admiration. That's clear, right? It is a place of admiration. Writers might choose a subject that isn't something a person they don't necessarily admire, but they think it exemplifies something that they want to explore. So, is what attracts you to Kit Siang is, as you put it, a kind of life of struggle, the fact that he was on the other side of power, that he was the underdog. Is that where it's coming from?
Yes, partly that, yeah. Because, you know, I've always been in favor of underdogs. For instance, just look at the English Premier League, you know. Malaysians, most of them will have as their favorite club Manchester United, Manchester City, Chelsea and whatnot. But I chose West Ham United, who are always struggling to stay afloat in the Premier League. But this season they're doing pretty well though. So yeah, the underdog, and also because I could empathize with him, because I also see myself as an underdog, you know, and I could relate to him also in terms of the kind of persecution that I myself have encountered. Of course, on a very, very minor scale compared to his. So, you know, the things that I've, you know, suffered at the hands of, well, I don't think I need to go into detail on this, but you're right. And of course it starts with admiration. Nonetheless, admiration not to the extent of being carried away to become blurred by it, and therefore not delivering an objective examination of the man.
Right, okay, so that's the tricky part. But so there's admiration, there's a bit of, you see a bit of yourself in his struggles, and therefore this is perhaps also speaks to the story of many Malaysians who see, like you, see themselves as victim of a system that perhaps was not inclusive, not fair, not meritocratic, and so on and so forth. So then the question is, what kind of critical distance, right? And this is where you just said, it's like you're not, as it were, blindsided by your admiration. How do you create the conditions for a kind of critical distance between you and the subject? And in this case, a man who I guess you interviewed after the fall of Pakatan Harapan. So he had that long struggle. Then there was this real peak, a high, though you described his initial response as somewhat in a kind of typical PJ uncle kind of way. You know, he was milling about in a pasar malam or something like that. You know, it's very modest. And then it's fall, right? So a very interesting trajectory, the point at which you start to talk to him. How do you create that critical distance?
Well, I interview people who are close to him, but who have also been at odds with him. Some of them are his party comrades. Some of them are his political opponents. So I try to find some kind of different perspectives to this man in order to create as objective a view of him as possible. Now, to be totally objective, I have to admit, it's impossible. You cannot get it in any kind of media or in any kind of book or any biography. There will be some subjectivity as well. And of course, in the book, I inject my own subjective views, some of which Kee Siang has come out to say that he doesn't agree with. Yeah? So maybe I say certain things that are critical about him, which he doesn't think quite fits the context. Or maybe I have certain ideas about what happened in the historical times that he felt maybe he would have seen such a thing differently. But I try to get different perspectives in order, as you say, to create that distance.
These responses from him, did they happen after the book was published and out, or did you give an advance copy so that you were also continue your dialogue with him once the manuscript was done?
He never knew what the contents of the book would be throughout the whole process of my putting it together. And he never asked. That is great credit to him. It tells me what kind of a person he is. He never asked. He never even tried to interfere or even to suggest. So the first time he read the book was when I handed him the first published copy. And until that time, he didn't know what to expect. And that time when I handed him the copy, he was preparing for his case against Pandi Ali. And he had to read up all the case notes, you know. He had to be sure he was going to testify the next day on the witness stand. But he told me he was supposed to be doing that. When I handed him the book, he couldn't resist reading it. So he managed to read 100 pages that very day itself.
Oh, okay, so I admit I haven't gotten past page 100, but I have read the first part, and it really is quite compelling. I mean, you do tell quite a compelling story, but it did make me think, Thuan Chye, when I started, like, your descriptions of him in the opening pages is such a contrast to, say, somebody like a Dr. Mahathir, right? A man who sees himself as at the center of the nation, who takes for granted his privileges and and perhaps presumes that he has a kind of historic role to play in Malaysia's nation building. Is Mahathir the kind of opposite of a Kee Siang? There they are, political rivals, one jailing the other. Is Mahathir the other side of the coin?
In a lot of respects, yes. You see, Kee Siang is different. He is not the flamboyant sort. He is not the kind of person who would push himself into the forefront. In fact, he would retreat more because he, as he has expressly said to me, is an introvert. And it is true. You will discover this when you get to know him better, when you talk to him. He's not a person who talks a lot. Yeah? He's also, and then when it comes to his private life, he's even more quiet about it. So he is not the sort who would see himself as the center, as being at the center of Malaysian politics or Malaysian society.
Though he has been, in many ways.
He has been, but without his consciously wanting to be. He's like a working politician, you know, like working actor, working this and that. But he just does things that he believes should be done, and he just carries on. He doesn't push himself. He doesn't say that, oh, you know, this is me. The ego doesn't intervene. And that is probably why he has managed to continue to go on like that.
All right, okay. We're going to come back with maybe a deeper description of the book, its structure and so on, but we'll take a break first. Join me shortly on Let's Talk. Hi, and welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, with me Kee Thuan Chye, the author of this book, Lim Kit Siang, Malaysian First. We're at the Gerak Budaya bookstore in Petaling Jaya, surrounded by a lot of biographies, a lot of political biographies here on the shelves. This, hot off the press, almost. Yeah. It's volume 1, so there's much more to come. I must say, Thuan Chye, I was really taken by the descriptions of the man in his youth. I mean, the picture, I think, is he as a 16-year-old, right?
13-year-old.
13-year-old,
yeah.
There he is. 13-year-old, almost baby face at this point. He does become quite manly, and he's quite a strapping lad, I think, by the time he's in his late teens. But I was really surprised by some of the details. His early marriage to his sweetheart, the fact that he kind of dropped out of school and decided to marry her against his parents' wishes. Not the model Asian son by any means, right? But choices that led him on this extraordinary trajectory into Singapore and therefore also into politics. I want you to help us understand that part of the book, because that's where I know it best at the point. Wonderful, I love the photographs in it, I must say, extraordinary photographs. How difficult was it to tell that story? Because there are a lot of very interesting personal choices, not quite explained. I don't still get a sense of why he made those choices, why he defied his parents, why he sacrificed his education, how compelling this love was for this young woman.
I think the clues are there throughout the book that, you know, Kit Siang is that sort of a person. When he's set on something, he will do it. So in this case, he was set on this girl. So he just wanted to marry her, regardless of, you know, even when he does things in regard to politics, he doesn't sometimes he doesn't even consult his wife. His wife also, there's some part in the book which says that when he wants to do something, he just does. He doesn't ask me, right? So that's the kind of guy he is, you see. I managed to find out all this also from talking to his close friends, those friends who grew up with him, his classmates, schoolmates, and got an idea of, you know, just...
Was he uncomfortable talking about this period of his life?
No, he was always very forthcoming about with any question I asked. He might not give very big, long answers because he's quite, you know, terse usually in his answers. And when it comes to his private life, he would usually become amusingly sheepish, which is rather cute. And then I would still probe and probe and probe, you know. And sometimes if he doesn't want to answer it directly, he would just make a joke of it. And he has a great sense of humor. It's a great dry sense of humor.
Right.
So that's a way of deflecting sometimes.
You do, in fact, put into, you know, the mouths of these other characters you're speaking to, descriptions of Kit Siang. And one was a habit he had where he is advised not to carry on with this habit of reading while in the presence
yes.
of others, or where he's meeting others, or even at a press conference. So, you know, carrying a large book around with him, and the question of that exchange he had. If you could tell us a bit that, the exchange he had with his editor about the accuracy of reporting while he was reading.
Yes. Well, he's actually, I suppose his reply to his editor saying that, you know, I can still read and listen, because when you read, you only use your eyes. You can still hear. Of course, I think that was a kind of a dry joke.
Yeah.
But
that along having a tape recorder, I think.
Of course, he would have had a tape recorder. And I think he was very serious about his job as a journalist in Singapore.
But he did kind of fall into it, didn't he? If I'm correct, I mean, he didn't set out to be a journalist.
No.
These were the pressures that came from making the choice to marry. He needed a job, and that was a job that he found himself getting.
That's why he applied for it, and he was called for an interview. They didn't offer him a job straight away, but later on they wrote to him and offered it. But you're right, as he tells so in the book, he didn't have any ambitions to be a journalist. He didn't set out to be one. It just came along, and he took it. And I suppose it was very good for him in that sense. It helped to groom him for his political exploits later on.
Right. I mean, I feel the same way about my relationship with journalism, to be honest. But okay, let's take that other part, and this is where it gets really intriguing, because it's about his political involvement, his relationship to C.V. Devanaya, who became the president of Singapore at some point. And in fact, I think the first boss was also somebody who was destined to become president of Singapore, Wee Kim Wee.
Yes.
Yes. And so there is that. But you talk about you know, him becoming one of the youngest leaders of the trade union, the journalist trade union in Singapore, and how that set him up. And it is the first inkling we get of his politics, which is interesting because it might fly in the face of what we think of him as a man who stood up against power. But in the Singapore context, he was actually on the side of power. He leaned towards Lee Kuan Yew and the PAP, which is not democratic by any means. It's quite an authoritarian party, and was at that point a party determined to crush all its rivals.
No, I wouldn't say that he leaned on the side of Lee Kuan Yew. As he says so in the book, Devanaya liked him because he was very frank whenever he was critical of the PAP and Lee Kuan Yew. And that's why Devanaya decided to recruit him eventually. So he kept a very open mind. But when it came to trade union matters, he calculated that it would be stupid to go against the powers that be. Because in Singapore, it was so controlled, even then. So he therefore advised them that, look, why do you want to invite trouble upon yourself? Because if you carry on with the strike and so on, the powers that be are going to clamp down on you. And that's not going to be good for the trade union, and that's not going to be good for the trade union members.
So there's a kind of pragmatism, is that what you're saying?
Yes, he's a pragmatic man.
Okay, but there was also that earlier incident in school with the alleged pedophile and him standing up to it. So I think in all these instances, you're trying to demonstrate a quality that the man has, right?
Yes.
So
you're trying to say that he's anti-establishment? He
was
never
he?
was.
He was never
No,
anti-establishment.
He has said that to me. I'm not anti-establishment. Yeah. So he will stand up for the downtrodden. But that's not being anti-establishment. He was a prefect in school, deputy head boy. He was hoping to be the head boy, but something happened. The teachers didn't want him to be. He was too expressive, too vocal. They didn't like that, so they made him deputy. He was quite disappointed. He was not anti-establishment, and he says so very clearly to me.
So does that square with a lot of assumptions people make today or in the last several decades about who Kee Siang is? Because Kee Siang has stood up for particular ideals about the Malaysian nation.
Yes.
He's found himself detained, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And he has been critical
But let
of
me
the
ask
establishment.
you, standing up for the Malaysian nation, is that anti-establishment?
If the
No.
establishment is of a majoritarian sort? Yes, I guess it would
Well,
be.
well, that is not being anti-establishment. That is fighting against an authoritarian regime. That's different. That's not anti-establishment at all. What he wants is for the good of the country, to make a better Malaysia. Now, that to me is not anti-establishment at all. That is very proactive. That is very positive. That is behaving like a proper citizen. Yeah. So we have to be very careful there.
Yeah, so because I think we can all define anti-establishment in different ways, because for some groups of people, anti-establishment is actually a positive quality, right?
Just because you fight against the government.
You fight against the status quo, right?
That's right.
Okay, let's just talk about this and tell us a little bit about the book, because I think what I can see coming is various moments that give you an insight or clue into the man, right?
Yes.
So in volume 1, because how many volumes are there going to be? They're going to be 2. Okay. Okay. So volume 1, where does it take us? What will the reader be encountering in these? My goodness, there are 39 chapters.
Yes.
In these 39 chapters, what will the reader encounter?
Oh, a lot of things. Kee Thuan's struggles, the things he brought up, for instance, many people will not know that Undi 18 was not first tabled in Parliament in 2019. It was tabled 4.5 centuries earlier by Kee Thuan.
Decades.
In 1978. Decades, not centuries. In 1978, he moved the private members' bill to have the voting age lowered from 21 to 18. He was the first to do it. He was ahead of his time. You know, nobody seems to acknowledge that these days. So, apart from his struggles and so on, you'll get to know about his times. How Malaysia has progressed, or rather regressed, from the 60s until now. How the rot started even way back then in the past, due to the machinations of the leaders of the past. Okay? And also how the rot in this country, the filth that we see around us today, solidified in the 1980s under the watch of Prime Minister, you know who lah, okay? And
his name can be mentioned.
Mahathir Mohamad lah.
Unlike the name of the title of some of your books. Okay.
Yes. So Mahathir was the one who oversaw a lot of things that went wrong in this country and caused a lot of damage. For instance, the BMF scandal, which erupted then. It was the biggest government scam that would spawn many other government corruption cases over time. So 1MDB and beyond.
Okay, so
it was under his watch.
Right. So
and the book examines it extensively.
Right. Okay. So we also come to a point in Kee Thuan's history where he's reconciled with the very figure that you have identified as the cause for much of the decline of the integrity of our democratic institutions. We have just about a minute left.
You put it very nicely.
We have
very
just
politely.
Maybe that's his pragmatism. Is that his pragmatism?
Pragmatism, definitely. But you'll read more of it in volume 2 because this book doesn't cover until that time yet. I won't tell you where it ends because it's meant to be a cliffhanger.
Okay. Which is like a daytime soap. Okay.
Want to find out what happens in volume 2, yeah?
Okay, I'm looking forward, Thuan Chye, to finishing the book. And your second volume, when do you expect it out?
Well, it takes a long time to write. This one took 1.5 years to complete the whole process. But actual writing for this was about 9 months. And a lot of it was like every day, no day off. Please don't try this at home. and so I foresee that volume 2 will be even harder to write because there's so many more things to cover, and also a lot of it is very current. So it's more challenging, and it will involve a lot more research.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kee Thuan Chye, here with Lim Kee Siang, Malaysian First, Volume 1, None But the Bold. Hot off the press, Thuan Chye, of course, is well known as an actor, playwright, author of many polemical books on Malaysian life. So I'm grateful to have a chance to speak to him. That's all we have for Let's Talk this week. Come back next week. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, only on Astro AWANI.